Welcome everyone. Welcome to the Planning Your Grasstop Strategy for 2021 session. I'm really excited to be here today. And if we haven't met, my name is Sara Wanous. I started volunteering with CCL back in 2016. And I've been lucky to be working here for the past 3 years, assisting all of you in the awesome grassroots work that everyone's been doing over that time. We might know each other from the information session or from answering your membership questions or from state policy efforts, but I am newly on the research team here at CCL. Today, we're going to be talking about what efforts you can focus on to pull the Grasstops lever really hard in 2021 to help get us closer and closer to passing the Energy Innovation Act. The ideas and the strategies that we'll talk about today are all informed by the experience of our government affairs team in DC and what they know about what motivates members of Congress, and also by all of the hard work that CCLers like you have been doing in chapters across the nation and what has worked well for them. We will have time at the end for questions. So if you do have any questions throughout this presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. Make sure you send them to Susan Adams. She put Ask Me in her name here in the chat. You'll have to send them to her. Susan is the person who's going to curate all those questions for us and make sure that we get to the questions that are the most asked and help us get through as many as we can. So make sure you send your questions to Ask Me, Susan Adams. And with no further ado, we can go ahead and get started. So let's start with the basics. What is Grasstop support and why do we care? The Grasstops are what we call the community leaders and influential people and organizations that represent jobs or people or interests of the community. So things like faith groups or businesses or community organizations. And we care about the Grasstops because your member of Congress cares about the Grasstops. Members of Congress are in their positions to serve the community and they recognize that one good way to do that is to be in touch with and develop good relationships with prominent voices in the community, especially voices that represent other voices. So this is a really supernatural way of working, and it's probably something that you've taken up to. For example, when you think about who you talk to most often at work, in your workplace, or at school, in your classes, you probably have a few friends or acquaintances that you made because you work really closely together on a lot of similar things, maybe similar projects, maybe you're in a lot of classes together. And since you all work together so much, you get to know them a little bit more and you know that you can trust their opinion because of that relationship that you have with them. If one of those people bring you an idea or come to you for help with something, you're probably a lot more inclined to help them or to trust their opinion than you would if it was someone brand new or someone that you just didn't know as well. And that's a supernatural response. It's a supernatural way to work. And that's the way members of Congress work too. Members of Congress are the same way, and getting Grasstop support is the equivalent of that. It's bringing those trusted opinions, those trusted messengers to the member of Congress and having them share their support for this policy too. So with that, and because you are all in this session today, I can imagine that you all recognize the importance of having a really good strategy for Grasstop's outreach to help move your member of Congress forward on climate solutions like the Energy Innovation Act. We've got these 3 priorities from all of our awesome chapters working across the country and also the experience of our government affairs team. I'll introduce them all now, and then we're going to go into detail about all of them. And I also have a bonus one at the end. Then we'll wrap up with resources and to give you time to ask questions as well. So keep sending those in the chat to Susan Adams. But the 3 priorities that we're going to talk about in depth are for your Grasstop strategy in 2021 are bipartisanship, state representatives, and businesses. And we'll dive right in with bipartisanship. We delayed this conference from the time that we normally host it earlier in November to make sure that we have election results to advise you on. So we know that Biden is our president-elect, and he's shown a really strong commitment to bipartisan solutions and working across the aisle throughout his career. So bipartisan is something that will be a value to him and his team. We also know that the margin in the House of Representatives narrowed, so bipartisanship will be essential to passing things through the House. We don't yet know the result of the Senate, as we do have to wait for the runoff in Georgia. But however those 2 races go, we do know that there are going to be extremely tight margins in the Senate. All of this matters because we're going to need support on both sides of the aisle to move anything forward. Luckily, we are pretty good at that here at CCL. And this matters to your Grasstop strategy because it means that endorsements of support from both sides of the aisle are going to be valuable to you. Of course, endorsements from groups that lean towards the same party as your member of Congress are going to carry a little bit more weight with them. But being able to demonstrate that this is something that you could get votes for on both sides of the aisle will show that this is a politically viable solution. Across the board, endorsements and statements of support from conservative leaning or conservative associated groups are going to be valuable. Not only are these going to help us prove the bipartisan nature of our solution, but in your own district, but they can also help us prove that more broadly. So conservative leaning or conservative associated groups are going to be valuable everywhere. Next, we'll talk about state representatives. The opinions of state representatives are really valuable, can be really valuable to national legislators because they represent the same voters. State reps were elected to office by the same people, the same voters that elected the member of Congress. It might be a little bit easier for state reps to speak in support of something, of a national issue or a national legislation, since they don't directly vote on it. But at the end of the day, demonstrating broad and enthusiastic support from officials elected by the same body of voters does show that they're confident that their voters are supportive of solutions like this too. We have volunteers that have had a lot of success with this too. So for example, Oregon CCLers recently helped get the Oregon Climate Action Plan enacted in the state, which was a really big victory. And while they were working on that, they developed a lot of relationships with state legislators. Brian Etling is one of our leaders there, and he shared with me that they were able to keep that relationship up with all of those legislators that they had been working with. And now they're asking those legislators for endorsements of the National Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And it's going really great because they already have those existing relationships. The last I heard, they had secured 11 state House member endorsements and 5 state senator endorsements for a total of 16 through this method. We also have volunteers having a lot of success with this in Delaware. In Delaware, they were starting from scratch and building these relationships while they were working towards this endorsement ask. Beth Chahez is our state coordinator there, and she shared 3 of their tips for success in Grasstops engagement team call recently. Our Delaware volunteers, she said, were making sure that they personalize their presentations to the state rep that they're speaking to. They're talking to their priorities. Second, they're having constituents in all of those meetings. And third, they're making sure to follow up. And this has earned those Delaware volunteers 7 endorsements from state legislators, and 3 of those were from Republican state legislators, which is really exciting. And the last of those 3 priorities are businesses, of course, businesses. Endorsements from businesses are really important because they represent the health of the economy and jobs in the district. Endorsements from businesses of all sizes are valuable, and they can send different messages depending on the size of the business to the member of Congress. Endorsements from big businesses are really meaningful because they represent a lot of jobs and a big share of the local economy. But members of Congress also know that smaller businesses are sometimes affected differently or can't absorb the same policy costs that big ones can. So it's important for all of them to hear from smaller businesses too. And when they hear from a lot of small businesses saying the same thing, it can send a really powerful message that most of the other businesses like them think similarly too. One really great example of this, of CCLers making a big difference with this, is the 99 Bottles of Beer initiative, which started in our Asheville chapter, but quickly gained traction across a bunch of chapters. If you go to the energyinnovationact.org and scroll through all of the endorsements there, you'll see that we have almost 200 endorsements from breweries across the nation. And we know that U.S. breweries have a really important stake in climate solutions because 50% of the hops in the world are produced in the U.S. But this level of support from breweries is really important because it can get the attention of members of Congress and show them why it's important for them to be taking action on climate solutions. This is one industry that CCL's already had really important success with, but there are certainly many more opportunities out there just like this one. And building relationships and getting endorsements with businesses takes time. So as you're starting to look into getting business endorsements, it's going to be important for you to strategize which will be the most meaningful to your member of Congress so that you're spending your time and effort in a really useful way. If you're not sure which endorsements would be the most meaningful to your member of Congress, one effective way to find out would be to simply ask. In your lobby meeting, you might try to ask questions like, whose support do you need for this bill would be meaningful to you? Or who would you need to see on board with this policy in order to act on it? Then you can take those answers and you can focus your efforts on those industries or business or even specific businesses maybe, and bring them back some relevant endorsements in a future meeting, which will really help answer their questions and get to move your representative forward. To try to determine what industries to target, you can also research your members' donation records, places that they receive donations from. These are public records, and websites like opensecrets.org make them really easily searchable. You can target your efforts on industries that are represented really strongly in the donation records. And this is a smart strategy because you know that these are areas that already have your members' attention. So getting endorsements from these areas will be very meaningful to them. And like I said, we have a bonus one here for you too. So one more bonus point for you to think about as you strategize your approach to Grasstops engagement in 2021 is to keep building those relationships after you secure the endorsement. Getting an endorsement rarely happens in one sitting. You'll meet with this person or this organization a few times at least before you get their endorsement. And all of this time, you'll be learning about what they care about, what concerns they have, what they're working on, and you'll be building a relationship with them. And if we know anything at CCL, it's that relationships are very powerful things. So once you have that endorsement, do not drop off the face of the earth. You can try asking yourself things like, would they maybe be an asset to bring into your lobby meeting to express their interest in the Energy Innovation Act with that member of Congress that you're working with? They can hear it straight out of their mouth. Or maybe would there be any other endorsements that you're looking to gain, maybe in a similar industry that might benefit from hearing from this endorser? Maybe this will help you get more endorsements. Would they maybe be interested in making their public statement of support, maybe on their social media, or giving us a quote that we can use to help move other endorsers forward? But know that keeping up the relationship can help you help them advance climate solutions as well. And we're about to get to questions, but before we do get to questions, I want to take you on a tour of a couple of resources that can help you with your forming your Grasstops engagement strategy and getting any questions answered that we don't get to on our call today. We'll drop links to all of these in the chat as well. But the first resource that I wanted to point out is the Grasstops Engagement Forum. This is where you can go to get any questions that you have answered or to have discussions with other volunteers working on Grasstops engagement. There's also a Grasstops engagement action team with really dedicated folks who can help you troubleshoot any specific challenges that come up in your work. This action team also hosts very helpful monthly webinars that you can join or watch recordings of. Similarly, we have the Business Climate Leaders Action Team, which is very specifically focused on this outreach and getting endorsements from businesses. The business climate leaders have a lot of really useful pre-made presentations and other resources, and can also help you troubleshoot anything that you come across in getting a specific business endorsement. Then there's the Grasstops Engagement Tracker. This is where you can check before doing any outreach to make sure that we're not duplicating any efforts. And this is also where you can track the endorsements that you're pursuing. And last but certainly not least, there's the energyinnovationact.org website. This is the supporters page where you can see the endorsements from around the country that have already been made. And you can also access an endorsement map where you can see the endorsements that you get in your specific district or state. And with that, we've come to time for questions. Like I promised, we've got about 15 minutes for questions here. So Susan, what are we seeing in the chat?
Yes, there are lots of juicy questions.
Awesome.
First off, Neela Edens would like to know, how do CCL congressional liaisons use business endorsements in their lobby meetings?
Yes. So it's not even just the liaisons, it can be the whole lobby team can decide to bring these up. So endorsements are something that you can, if you were to go to this endorsement map and print out either like a list of all of the endorsements that you've gotten in your district or your state, or you could print out like a specific letter from a specific business that you think might be really meaningful, and present them to your member of Congress and say, look, this business who is a really big employer in our district is on board with the Energy Innovation Act. This is a reason that you should also be on board with the Energy Innovation Act. But bringing those to the member of Congress, like I was saying, these are trusted people, these are trusted messengers, these are people that the member of Congress knows that they have big stake in the game in the people that they represent. So these are people that they want to make happy. And if they know that that they are also on board with the Energy Innovation Act, it makes it easier for them to move forward with support and take more active roles of support for it.
Great. So there's another question from Jerry Porter. After getting an endorsement from our busy state legislators, we're uneasy asking for letters, statements, and videos. Do you have any perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, so really good point, Jerry, that every relationship is going to be an individual relationship. So you can't, there isn't a single blanket statement that I can make that's going to apply to every single relationship that you get with an endorser. If you get the sense that this is a person who's not going to be open to more contact from you, and the endorsement is as far as they were willing to go, that might be okay if not. But if this is something that they seemed at all enthusiastic, that are all interested in or enthusiastic about when you were getting that endorsement from them, it's likely that this is something that they really care about. And this is something that they would be interested in doing more to help, more with the position of power that they have to help move this forward. Do think about the fact that when you approach an endorser and provide them with additional steps that they can take to help move this bill forward, a lot of times you are also providing them with a useful thing. You're providing them with an opportunity for them to continue engaging and continue to support things that they really care about.
Great, thanks so much. Nadine asks, what about Grasstops and the environmental justice community? How can we better build relationships with those Grasstops?
That's a really great point. We've got a lot of great resources for that on our website, but I will say that working with other community organizations who are also working on environmental issues is going to be a lot different than approaching businesses or approaching state representatives. So I do encourage you to go start to check out some of those kinds of resources on community afterwards, or start asking those kinds of questions in the Grasstops Engagement Action Team. But one thing about working with environmental justice organizations is that, or any environmental organizations, is understanding that they also are really engaged in this issue, and they also have solutions that are really important to them. And we here at CCL know that the Energy Innovation Act is the best first step, but we also know that it's not a silver bullet. So recognizing that the solutions that they're working on are important too, and they have reasons that those are the important issues that they're working on, and trying to find ways to work with them on their goals as well, so that later they'll have a chance to help you work on your goals with the Energy Innovation Act, is a good rule of thumb for working with environmental justice organizations. I also failed to say this earlier, but I wanted to say that Tamara Staten is also on the call, and she's also great at this. So Tamara, feel free to jump in if you have anything to add to any of this.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, here's a good question from Kelly Patterson. What kind of vetting process is used when an individual endorses? And then as a secondary question, Delania asks, when a business leader signs, how does that funnel into an HR 763 endorsement? I mean, I guess just kind of what's that process?
Yeah, so when someone endorses, the way they will endorse is on the energyinnovationact.org website, which why not? We'll take you there right now. When I take you to the energyinnovationact.org website, there's a simple form that they can fill out to endorse the bill as their endorsement. And then that endorsement will not immediately show up in the supporters tab. It'll go through kind of an intensive vetting process. We have a couple layers of volunteers through the Grasstops engagement team, actually, that vet those endorsements. They go through, they make sure that everything adds up, that it's a real business, that there's someone who really works there, that all the contact information is correct, so that it is someone who really endorsed the Energy Innovation Act. And then it goes through a final staff check as well, just to make sure that nothing is fishy before it shows up on the supporters page here as one of these numbers, or if you click on them, as one of these. And Susan, did I get the second question too there, or did I miss it?
I think so. You know, how that makes it from BCL to CCL, those are interlinked.
Yeah, Business Climate Leaders works with Citizens Climate Lobby. They're an action team with CCL. So if the Business Climate Leaders are working on are helping you get an endorsement for the Energy Innovation Act, they'll still be directing the endorser ultimately to this same endorsement form.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And then we have a question from Marie. Are businesses the only or best endorsers? What about veteran military groups, for example?
Yeah, so again, we've done our best here to, when I came up with these 3 recommendations as good areas to focus your strategy for 2021. These are broad categories, but I do want to say that every group should be definitely tailoring their strategy specifically to their own members of Congress, their own representatives and senators, because if military is something that is really important to your representative or to your senators, then getting those kinds of veteran endorsements are going to be super valuable to that member. That's going to be different in some states. It's going to be different with some with some legislators, but we do think that getting endorsements from across the aisle, state representatives, and getting businesses to endorse are going to be some broad areas that will be applicable to everyone.
Thank you so much. Let's see. Dylan asks, he works for a large corporation. How would you suggest he begins having a conversation with his company about the prospect of supporting the Energy Innovation Act?
Dylan, that is my favorite question yet. Thank you so much for being excited to work with your company to get an endorsement for the Energy Innovation Act. So the very first step that you're going to want to take is to go to the Grasstops engagement tracker and searching the name there. If anyone pops up below, you'll want to contact that delegate who's already working with that organization, and they'll fill you in on what efforts there are, and they'll let you know how you can help move their efforts along. If there isn't someone who's already working on getting an endorsement there, you should reach out to the business climate leaders or the Grasstops engagement action team. They can help you put together a strategy for that specific business. They can help give you resources that will help you give a presentation and strategize who to talk to. So in summary, check the Grasstops engagement tracker and reach out to business climate leaders.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see. John Saban asks, if an endorser owns a business, does it make more sense for them to endorse as individuals or on behalf of the business that they own?
Yeah, it would probably make most sense to endorse on behalf of the business that they own. The thing there is that businesses represent all of the jobs that that business has. It represents all of the strength that they have in the economy, as well as the opinion of the prominent individual. So it's kind of like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle isn't a square. When the business endorses, it covers all of that. But if just the CEO endorses, it doesn't necessarily tell the member of Congress in the same way that the business is also on board with this. That being said, if there are some businesses who have a structure where it makes it harder for them to endorse as a business. So if someone who is a prominent CEO wanted to endorse in the meantime, before they can get their business on board with it, that's great too. We'll take what we can get.
Okay, we have another questions. How do we initialize a contact with a business or during this time of the pandemic? And then sort of in the same vein of the pandemic, and then how do we present our endorsements virtually most effectively in a lobby meeting?
Great question. Yeah, so it's definitely going to look different in a pandemic, reaching out to those businesses. So one thing is that it depends on the person, but some people actually have a little bit more time right now than usual. So reaching out via email and setting up a meeting via Zoom is always an option. It's as a stand-in for reaching out and setting up a meeting in person. Of course, this is going to be something that might be a little bit different for any business that you might be reaching out to. So business climate leaders is still an option if you wanted to reach out to them to strategize with that specific business that you are thinking about reaching out to. And then, sorry, Susan, remind me the second half of that.
Oh, sure. And is there a way to be particularly effective virtually sharing the endorsements in a lobby meeting?
Of course, yeah. So one thing that's different about virtual lobby meetings than in-person lobby meetings is you can't really like bring something to hand to them in the virtual meeting in the same way that you could in the in-person lobby meeting. So I think that one option that you have is in the planning of the meeting, in the when you're sending an email confirming the time that you'll be meeting, you could include an attachment of the endorsements that you want to talk about, and then you could bring that up in the meeting for them. You also, if you are able to meet on Zoom with the person that you're meeting with, or you're able to share your screen, maybe show them. You could even take them on a tour of that endorsement map on the Energy Innovation Act website and show them who endorses specifically in their district or in their state in real time, and explore with them which are the most meaningful to them. Those are a couple options that you have.
Awesome. There are so many questions and so many good ones.
I'm glad we have time for them.
Yeah, it's great. Here's a question. Is it a good idea to start small? That is, to start with a relatively non-influential group to get some experience before going after bigger fish?
I don't think that you need to necessarily start small, but what I will say is that both small and big businesses are meaningful to members of Congress in different ways. So big businesses are influential to members of Congress because they're big businesses. They hold a lot of stake in the local community. They employ a lot of people. These are really, if something changes, if they pass a policy that affects that business in a negative way or in a positive way, it's something that's going to affect their job as a member of Congress. Small businesses are influential to them because they need to know that those businesses won't be negatively affected as well by members of Congress recognize that big businesses have a little bit more leeway in a little bit more cushion to deal with the costs of a policy possibly, but they need to know that small businesses won't be too negatively affected by this as well. So like in that example that I was saying about the brewers, what's really powerful about getting almost 200 breweries to endorse the Energy Innovation Act, that tells members of Congress broadly that, okay, this is something that breweries really care about for some reason, and I should probably be keyed into what this connection between breweries and climate change is and why I need to solve climate change for the brewers in my district. If we're able to do that with other small businesses, like I don't know, insert the small business that came to your mind when I said that. If we're able to do it with those small businesses too, shows members of Congress the effects and how it affects all these different businesses.
All right. Let's see. There were a couple of questions around what is your strategy if your member of Congress is already a co-signer? Like, is this still something that's important?
Yeah, so it depends. It is important still because of the way I'm saying that there are these endorsements in large numbers can help influence members from other districts. So when we get thousands and thousands of endorsements, that's something that can catch the attention of some of members of any district, showing that just people broadly support. If you're talking about your representative in the House, I would ask, are both of your senators also interested in the Energy Innovation Act? You can also start targeting endorsements that would move them more forward on this and get them interested in helping to be one of the initial co-sponsors in the Senate.
Excellent. All right. Another question. Are we better off starting with an endorsement of carbon pricing or climate and then building up to support of the bill?
I think that that's something that you're really going to have informed by your understanding of the business that you're reaching out to, maybe the person that you're talking to. So I would say if I had to make a blanket statement that it's best to go straight for the Energy Innovation Act, that's ultimately the endorsement that we're going to want. And if they're not willing to endorse the Energy Innovation Act specifically, you could ask them if they would be willing to support carbon pricing. That would just get rid of one extra step for you. But that being said, if you know this is someone that's going to be hesitant about the idea of carbon pricing as a whole, and that you think it might be an effective strategy for them specifically to endorse carbon pricing first, that's helpful as well.
Great, thank you so much. Let's see. So there's been a couple questions about universities. If we want endorsements at major universities, do we go to various departments or the president? Do you have tips on how best to approach universities?
Yeah, I would recommend reaching out to Clara. She's our higher education coordinator. And maybe Susan, you could help me by dropping her email in the chat. It's just clara@citizensclimate.org. But I do know that there are student groups that have had some successes with reaching out to universities. I think that it might be different at different universities. I'm sorry that I don't have an answer right off the top of my head for you on universities.
That's totally fine.
And I think we have time for just one more question.
I think you're right. How important do you see Rotary's new engagement with the environment and climate action to members of Congress? Many community leaders are Rotarians, so that works well in smaller towns.
Yeah, even our founder was a Rotarian, so that's something that we hold pretty special to our heart here at CCL. I hate to keep saying this to you all, but there is a lot of difference between individual members of Congress. If I could give you any one piece of really meaningful advice, it would be to think specifically about your member of Congress and what things will influence them specifically. As blanket statements, looking up the industries that they support and state representatives are going to be helpful things this coming year. But if you know that your member of Congress has any connections to Rotary, Rotarians are going to be super meaningful to them. But thank you all so much, and I hope that this was helpful. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.